let's see what you can do to get promoted faster in management consulting. Generally speaking, earning the promotion in management consulting is a pretty long process. I'm going to show you how to increase the probability of getting the promotion fast. And in order to do that, we will first start by discussing what is actually the prerequisite for the promotion. In other words, delivering value. So we will see how you can deliver value and why it is so important. Afterwards, we will talk about demonstrating the value to your boss. And finally, we will discuss the process that will help you get the promotion faster. So enjoy the movie and let's get to the first part where we will actually see why delivering value is so important.
Deliver value. Delivering value is extremely important and unfortunately difficult. When you look at your relation with the firm, with your employer, you will see that he gives you some money in the form of wage, salary, bonuses, and he expects some value. And value is not working hard. It's about giving to the firm, to the employer, something he considers valuable. And this may have different forms. So one of them might be a physical product. So for example, you produce a part of a product, maybe a tool, maybe a machine. It might be digital product, so post, video, manual tool, software, a service. So maybe you're giving him advice, you train people, you analyze something that he's not capable of, you move things around. The value can take a form of something external. So for example, he might expect you to bring new customers or generate sales. In some cases, they will hire you and the value you will give them is simply the status or the show-off effect. So some companies, for example, build internal consulting departments because they consider them something which such companies of their size do. And obviously you can have other forms. For example, the value you create for them might be the fact that you give them a different point of view. No matter what is the value, you have to simply understand it in order to be able to deliver it. So the first thing you have to figure out is simply what's valuable to your customer, what he expects from you. He obviously usually pays you per hour, but how much you earn actually depends how much of the value which he has in mind, maybe he has not communicated to you, you bring, you deliver to him. And how to do it, we're going to discuss in the next lecture, where we'll look at the process of figuring out what's the value and how to deliver it to the employer, your boss, the firm you're working for. Now let's talk about the process you should apply to deliver the value. So we first going to look at the steps and then I'm going to show you a short example. So let's go with the steps of delivering value. So first you have to figure out who decides actually about the value. So usually in the firm, it will be your direct boss or somebody above him, but you have to know who decides about that in order to do the second step. So define with him what the value for him and the firm is and how obviously he gonna measure that. And we go, thanks to that, to the step 3. So you should define with, for example, your boss, the KPIs to measure the output and the quality of the value. So you have to know who decides about the value, how he defines the value, and how he measures the value. Once you do that, you can move to the step number 4. So learn how often and how the value will be measured. And again, it might not be by the person who decides about the value, but somebody different. And finally, once you know this, you have the final step where you have to simply decide what to do to deliver more value, because as we know, this will impact how much you earn in the long run. And to see how it works in practice, let's have a look at sales rep, so the direct sales force. So we've got the 5 steps we have discussed, and now let's see who defines the value and how it can be defined. So when we are talking about who decides about the value, in the case of the sales representative, let's assume that this is a direct sales force. It will most likely be the sales director or some regional director. The value, the way he defines the value might be different depending on the company, but usually what you would see is the revenue generated by the customers assigned to the specific sales rep or the gross margin generated by those customers. When it comes to KPIs, it can be the gross margin expressed in value or against some plans or percentage execution of the plan. And usually there will be some additional KPIs, like for example, payment terms expressed in days, or maybe to what extent the receivables have been paid by the customers. Now we have to obviously learn who and how often measures that. And let's say in the case of the sales rep, it might be monthly or quarterly. It's hardly ever annually, but with a long selling process, it might be actually true. And this is being measured in this case by finance department. This is also important to make sure that the way your boss understands value, the sales director, is the same as finance department. You might have certain discrepancies and it might cause some problems. And finally, obviously, we have to decide what to do. So given what is the value, how it is being measured, here we've got a certain action plan. Obviously, it can be different. So one point would be to improve the acquisition of new customers, then create tools that will shorten the visit at the customer's site so you can do more customers per day or per week. And finally, organize the routes in such a manner that you spend less time traveling. So as you can see, we went through the 5 steps. So we defined what the value is, how it is being measured, how often and by whom, and then this helps us decide on the action plan. And this is something which we can work with and implement it. As we said, it's not enough to create the value. You also have to show it to the world, demonstrate that you have delivered the value you were supposed to do. And to exemplify it, we're going to start with short story, short conclusion from a Danish philosopher, Kierkegaard. So this famous philosopher wondered what sound makes the tree when it falls in an empty forest. He came to the conclusion that it doesn't really matter. If there is no observer, the tree doesn't matter. The tree doesn't exist. And this is true when it comes to the value you create. Only the presence of the observer makes something real. And that's why if nobody knows about your value, the value you have created, it doesn't really exist as well. And this shows you how important it's not only to create the value, but actually to demonstrate it to the world so they know how valuable you are. And we have some tips that will help you to demonstrate value, and let's briefly go through them. So first of all, pick the right boss. If you have a shitty boss, no matter how much value you do, it will not be recognized. So the first step would be just to make sure that your boss can recognize value and that actually he is interested in that. After that, obviously, you have to define with him what the value is. So you are working on the right thing. Maybe instead of quantity, he likes quality, or maybe the other way around. So make sure that you are on the same page. Obviously, as we said, you have to define and track KPIs for the value. And I would suggest discussing your progress in value creation with your boss. So once you know the boss, you know what the value deliver and how it is being measured, you discuss with him this, and this helps him to understand, first of all, how valuable you are, but also how you're progressing. So you might be actually creating more and more value. So this will be an extremely important step for the next thing we're going to discuss. So getting a raise. From other things that will help you demonstrate the value, I would mention the following things. So first of all, make yourself visible and the value you create. So for example, you might participate in some sort of rankings where it is visible that you're much better than the others. You can also participate in projects that will help you highlight the value you create, especially if it's with a lot of people that are well positioned in the organization and they can influence how much you earn or whether you get promoted or not. And the final 2 things are also connected with that. So I would create things that will be used by a large number of people in the firm, because in this way they can appreciate you. And the more people talk about how good you are in creating value, the more likely you are to get promoted or get a raise. And similar to that, you have creating things valuable that will be used maybe not by many people, but most important decision makers. So if you can create something which can be appreciated by your boss or the boss of your boss, then the likelihood of you getting a raise increases drastically. So have a look at that and think how you can apply it in your situation and which things you already have taken care of and which things have to be somehow addressed. At some point, if you want to earn more, you have to get a promotion, move to a higher position. And there are plenty of reasons why this is one of the most interesting solutions. So first of all, higher positions in most cases means higher salary. So in other words, it's not a raise, but rather a new salary for a totally new set of responsibilities. Usually also higher positions means more influence on the firm, which also helps you demonstrate the value you are creating to the firm. You will also have more exposure to board members in the outside world, which will be extremely important if you want to constantly get promoted and get raises. At a certain level, you will also be entitled to bonus schemes. So it's not just about having higher base salary, but it's also having access to bonus schemes. And in many cases, they can be much bigger than the base salary. Also, at higher positions, you'll benefit more from productivity gains if you are improving just your activity. So if you're improving the productivity of a small team or just of you, at higher positions, you will benefit also from productivity gains, because here you will be managing bigger teams. Therefore,
Therefore, even a small improvement will mean a lot of man hours being saved or a lot of additional work being done. And finally, if you change the company at higher position, your salary gain will be usually bigger than at lower level. Therefore, getting promoted should be always in your mind and try to figure out how to do it. I will just go briefly through proposed approach to getting promoted. So first, I would try to understand the career paths that exist in the firm. In many firms, they are not defined, and there are also some other informal rules that you have to be aware. So for example, director has to have at least a certain number of years experience in a specific department to become a director. So once you understand the career paths that exist in the firm, try to learn the requirements to get promoted. Obviously, first from the position you are in to the nearest position you want to get into, but later on you also have to know what kind of things you have to master. A lot of the things you will be required to do may take a lot of time. So it is always better to know ahead of time what you have to do because you have to somehow plan it. You also should understand the limitation that will exist within your firm. In many firms, the number of positions directly above you are obviously limited, so not all of your team members will be able to be promoted. Therefore, in many cases, the promotion will be outside your department, so you will be, for example, promoted to a manager of a different department. The fourth step is to define with your boss what you have to do to get promoted. Your promotion will depend on the gatekeepers, and the biggest of them will be probably your direct boss and his boss. Also, HR manager will have a huge influence on that. Therefore, try to define the requirements and try not only to fulfill them, but also to influence all the gatekeepers that may have an impact on your promotion. And finally, as always, execute and track your progress towards promotion. Once you have a defined criteria, it is much easier to plan what to do and in what order. Obviously, here we assume that there is certain career paths in your company, or at least some criteria that you can fulfill and be promoted. In some companies, you sometimes have to create it. So in this case, this step of defining is extremely important.